Episode 1. The Prayer Beneath the Red Light. I swear it wasn't the perfume, or the cheap wine, or even the moaning behind velvet walls. It was the way she prayed after it was over. Every single night, knees on the sticky floor, mascara streaking like holy ink down her cheeks. "Forgive me, Father," she whispered to a cracked ceiling. "I sin with strangers. Again, but I still believe in you." That's when he came. Not a man, not a ghost, but something with wings so quiet they didn't flutter the air. Only the soul. Mariah didn't scream when she saw him. That's the strange part. She simply looked up from the side of her stained mattress, lips parted, like she'd seen a vision she didn't deserve. He didn't speak. He just stood in the far corner of the room, behind the rosary. She hung on the wall next to a mirror to crack to reflect her full face. His body didn't glow, but the shadows around him refused to touch his skin. And his eyes, they weren't blue or gold. They were the color of knowing. She didn't ask who he was. She only whispered, "Why here?" And he answered, not with words, but with tears. They dripped from his eyes like melted light. And when they touched the floor, they didn't make a sound, only a scent. Frankincense, like the air of a chapel that hasn't been entered in years. Mariah thought she was hallucinating. She even laughed. But when she opened the window for air, she saw something terrifying. Every single cat in the alley was kneeling, facing her room, and one was crying. The next day, she told no one. Who would believe a horse saw an angel? Not even the priest, who passed by with pity in his eyes and judgment in his breath. But that night, she did it again. After the last client grunted and paid, after the bed she'd swallowed another secret, Mariah lit her tiny candle and knelt. And this time, he sat her beside her, not touching, not speaking, just being. She asked him, "Are you here?" Episode 2. He had no shadow. The girls began to notice it on a Tuesday. That was the day when everything in the brothel slowed down because of fewer clients. But because the mirrors stopped working, the tall one in room 3 cracked straight down the middle. Even though no one had touched it, the vanity in room 6 reflected everything except the bed. And in room 1, Mariah's room, the mirror still worked, but something was missing. Him, the angel. He sat her at the edge of her bed every night, quiet as breath, still as statues, but the mirror refused to show him, even when she traced his silhouette with her hand. The glass only gave her her own trembling fingers, reaching for absence. "I don't think he has a shadow," she whispered to Teresa, the girl with the freckled chest and tired eyes. Teresa laughed. "Maybe he's a ghost." Mariah shook her head. "Ghosts don't smell like heaven." They watched him from the hallway that night. One girl dared to hold a candle near him. Its flame danced wildly, then stopped, frowsy, as if time bowed down to his presence. But behind him, on the wall, nothing. No shape, no stretch of dark. The light passed through him but didn't leave a trace. That was when Eliza, the most cynical of them all, whispered, "Things that cast no shadow don't belong in our world." Word spread quickly. Even the Madame Old Ivanka with her rosary tattooed around her ankle started lighting incense in the hall, muttering prayers in Latin she hadn't recited since childhood. No one dared touch him, not even the brave ones, because when you stood too close, your skin remembered something that never lived. A longing, like homesickness for a place you never seen but once dreamed of as a child, right before waking up in tears. That week, Mariah stopped charging clients. She said she didn't feel right selling her body in a room that felt like a confession box. The madam screamed at her, cut her pay, threatened to throw her out, but the angel only looked up. Episode 3. The confession he never gave to God. They thought angels didn't carry guilt. They thought wings were for purity, not punishment. But his Saturday at the foot of Mariah's bed, like a man with a secret rotting inside his chest, one that no choir could drown out. And that night, he finally spoke. "I used to sing," he whispered, his voice barely touching the air. Mariah frowned mid-prayer. Her knees ached, but her eyes didn't blink. "Before the world was born, I sang, not with words, with light." He paused, and then I broke the silence of heaven with something unforgivable. She didn't ask what, but silence invites answers more than questions do. So he kept speaking. "There was a child," he said, "chosen, marked, a heart so pure, her soul hummed before birth. She was meant to rise, to speak prophecy, to awaken the sleeping breath of God in men's hearts. He closed his eyes. His wings flicker no longer white, not black, but dust-colored. She was 7 when I met her, already dreaming in languages forgotten by angels. She smiled at me once and said, "You have too much silence in your mouth." Mariah held her breath. One night, I touched her shoulder and felt her fate unravel. He swallowed hard, as if even angels could choke on memory. She died because I loved her, and heaven doesn't allow its messengers to feel what only humans should. He turned to Mariah now, his gaze deeper than any cathedral's vault. "I wasn't cast out," he said. "I left." Mariah's lips trembled. "Why come here?" "To suffer quietly," he answered, "among those already damned by men but still visited by God." He looked around the room, at the beds, the stains, the lipstick traces like blood offerings on glasses and bodies and sheets. "Do you know how often he watches this place?" he asked. Mariah shook her head. "Every night." The angel said, "He sees, he hears, but he waits, because faith born in filth is louder than sermons in gold." Then something strange happened. Mariah felt her tears slide backward up her cheeks, like time reversing. The room began to glow faintly, but not from candles, from remorse. Hers. Episode 4. The Girl Who Moaned. In Latin, they called her Luca, new girl, quiet eyes, skin like candlelight. She arrived on a Monday wrapped in silence, dragging a suitcase full of bruises and secrets. Didn't speak much, didn't need to. Her body did the talking and it made the clients kneel, even when they paid to dominate. But that night, she moaned in Latin. Mariah heard it first, not the usual cries, not the fake pleasure sounds they all learned to perform, but a language too old for sin. The voice behind the curtain didn't sound human. It rose like smoke from insensitive, choking, holy. Mariah pressed her ear to the velvet wall, and what she heard frenzy her breath. Corpus Domini, me culpa, miserere Deus. It wasn't just Latin, it was liturgical Latin, sacred, ancient, forbidden to be uttered in that room. Luca didn't even speak English fluently, so how did she moan the same prayers priests whispered during absolution? When the client stumbled outward unbuttoned, face pale, lips trembling, didn't say a word. He dropped the money on the floor and made the sign of the cross. Backward. Inside, Luca was on her knees, eyes rolled back, body still humming, and above her, barely visible, wings fluttered like they were being summoned or fed. Mariah rushed in. Luca looked up. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. Mariah knelt beside her. "Where did you learn those words?" "I didn't. I don't even know what I said." That night, the angel didn't sit in his usual place. He stood behind Luca, his wings open, not to protect, but to receive. And as Luca whispered again in her sleep, this time in a mix of Latin, Greek, and something older, his eyes closed as if he were praying through her. The next morning, two strange things happened. First, the priest from the local church came knocking, asking if a miracle had been reported on these grounds. Said someone in the choir had a vision, a whore crowned in light, speaking the tongue of seraphim. Second, Luca woke up crying out of fear, but shame. Episode 5. Baptized in blood, not water. He was a regular, middle-aged, always wore a blue tie, never asked for names, never offered his. He liked Luca, but that night, something was off. He was pale, sweaty, his hands trembled as he unbuttoned his shirt like a man trying to forget who he was. Luca said she didn't want to take him, but the man insisted. "Pray afterward," she hissed. "God doesn't pay rent." Luca stepped into the room like a lamb walking into a church that didn't deserve a cross. And 10 minutes later, the scream came. Mariah was the first to reach the door. The knob was hot, too hot. She kicked it open and saw blood everywhere. Luca was kneeling, hands soaked in red, her face frowning, not in horror but something closer to awe. The man lay on the floor, eyes wide open, mouth slightly parted, dead but peaceful. The other girls screamed. The man cursed. Someone called a doctor. Someone else called no one. But the angel. He walked in, and all the candles in the hallway lit themselves. He stepped through the blood, not a drop clung to his feet. Then, in front of everyone, he did something no one understood. He bent down, dipped his fingers into the dead man's blood, and traced a cross on Luca's forehead. The girls gasped. "What are you doing?" Mariah asked, her voice a threat of fear. "Anointing," the angel whispered. "Not all baptisms require water. Some require the price of a life willingly surrendered." Later, Luca revealed what had happened. The man had confessed everything to her, not just sins but fears. He told her about the daughter he abandoned, the affair, the embezzlement, the shame, and then he wept. "I didn't even touch him," Luca said. "I only held his face, told him God might still be listening if he screamed with his soul, not his mouth." He clutched his chest, whispered, "Forgive me," and then he died. But the strange part, no heart attack, no stroke. The doctor said it was like his heart just stopped needing to beat, as if something in Episode 6, the brothel that smelled like heaven one night. It began with the scent, not perfume, not sweat, not whiskey soaked into velvet, but something impossibly out of place. Frankincense. Thick, secret, heavy like cathedral silence. The kind of scent you only inhale on your knees. Mariah smelled it first, then Teresa, then the madam, who hadn't stepped foot inside a church in 30 years, began coughing violently and muttered, "That smell, it's what I remember before my mother died." The hallway flickered, the red bulbs that usually bathed the brothel in sin-stained glow dimmed, and for a moment, the walls turned golden, not painted, lit, as if something behind the plaster had awakened. Luca had been silent for 2 days. She didn't eat, didn't speak, just wrote, pages and pages in red ink. No one knew where she got it. The angel never left her side. That night, around 3:33 a.m., every girl woke up gasping, all at once. No noise had woken them, no nightmare, just a sensation. They were being watched, but not by a man, not even by the angel, by him who had been silent along. Mariah opened her door and found Luca standing barefoot in the hall, pages in her hand, eyes glassy. "They're not mine," Luca whispered. "What?" "These words, they're not mine. I just hear them in my blood." She handed Mariah a page. It read, "In the house of shame, I placed a lampstand. Let the wounded light be seen. For only among the unworthy can true praise be born." Then the moaning stopped, not just from Luca's room, from every room. No clients, no cries, only silence. And that scent. The whole brothel smelled like a funeral in heaven. Ivanka Madam stormed into the hallway, drunken, barefoot. "What the hell is going on? Why is it so quiet?" No one answered, because just then, the walls began to hum. Not loud, not music, but tone, vibration, like the bricks had lungs. And they were sighing something holy. The mirrors fogged up, the floors pulsed warm underfoot, and from somewhere deep within the walls, a sound emerged. A voice, not male, not female, just endless. It spoke only once. "You built this place to sell bodies. I have come to collect the hearts." Ivanka collapsed. She shook violently, eyes wide, her lips moved, but no words came out. Then she screamed it out of pain. But revelation. I saw him. Oh, Mariah asked, rushing to her. Ivanka wept, clinging to her ankle rosary. "The one I spat at. He's here." In the morning, all the clients were gone. They left without paying, without speaking. Some had left notes. One read, "I felt clean for the first time in years. I don't deserve it." Another, "There was a woman in my dream, dressed in shame, crowned in light. She forgave me before I asked." Luca burned her pages, every single one. They screamed again, louder this time. The ash turned white, and when the angel blew over it, the ash rose and hung in the air, like smoke, but shaped like letters. Only Mariah could read them. She whispered the translation. "Sanctuary has no walls, only wounds that welcome." And that night, as the girls slept beneath red sheets and stained ceilings, the brothel didn't feel like sin anymore. It felt like a cathedral where no one needed to kneel. Episode 7, the priest who came looking for the fallen. He arrived with a Bible to clean for the streets, black robes, white collar, eyes that didn't blink when prostitutes looked back. Father Elijah sent, he said, to investigate a rumor, though his tone suggested exorcism, not curiosity. He walked through the front door like it was a church gone rogue. and the moment he crossed the threshold, lights flickered. "I've heard," he said to Ivanka, "that something divine has been sighted here." She laughed, dry and hoarse. "Divine?" she scoffed. "You're 30 years too late." But her voice cracked because she had seen the angel, and she knew deep down this priest wasn't ready. Mariah watched from the stairs. Luca stood behind her, silent as ever. The scent of old incense still hung in the air, clinging to the walls like confession, too scared to leave the lips. Elijah began inspecting the rooms. He carried holy water, a crucifix, and a look that said, "I already know I'm right." He stepped into Luca's room. The angel was there, sitting at the edge of the bed, hands folded, wings barely visible like smoke, refusing to disappear completely. Elijah looked straight through him. He couldn't see him. "What is this place?" the priest asked, running a hand over the mattress like it might tell him a secret. "A threshold," Luca whispered, "between what was damned and what dares to be forgiven anyway." He narrowed his eyes. "You've been touched by something not of this world." Luca didn't flinch. "I was touched by God the day I was born. What came later was man." Elijah tried to bless the room. He raised his crucifix and said the rite, but as the words left his lips, the crucifix rusted in his hand. Just the edges, like something inside the room, refused to be judged. "You can't bless this place," Mariah said from the doorway. "It already has its own priest." She turned to the angel. He didn't smile, but he stood, and slowly he walked toward Father Elijah, still invisible to him, still silent. But as he passed, Elijah stumbled backward, gasping, as if something had pressed its hand into the core of his soul. I felt something," the priest whispered. "Warm, sad, ancient." Then louder, "Who is here? Reveal yourself." Episode 8, The Virgin Who Paid to Watch. She didn't belong there. Not with that white dress. Not with that ribbon Bible clutched to her chest like a fragile oath. But she stepped into the brothel as if she'd been called. Not lost. Her name was Clara, 17, virgin, and trembling not from fear, but something closer to hunger. Ivanka nearly laughed when the girl dropped a wad of crisp bills on the front counter. "No boys, no touching, no sin," Clara said, eyes wide. "I just want to sit and watch." What? Ivanka smirked. Clara's lips parted slowly, like the truth had weight. "The angel." Luca refused to speak to her. Mariah tried to send her away, but the angel, he didn't move. When Clara entered the candlelit room that night, he simply turned his face toward her, and something in her shattered. She didn't cry, didn't speak, just dropped to her knees as if gravity had become holy. And for 2 hours, she knelt, watching, breathing, whispering prayers that cracked mid-syllable, and the angel watched her too. The second night, she returned, same white dress, same soft shoes, but this time, barefoot. "I dreamed of his wings," she whispered to Mariah in the hall. "They don't flap, they hum, like organs in a broken church." Mariah's blood ran cold. That was exactly how Luca had described them. But Clara had never met her, never spoken to her. By the 4th night, Clara stopped praying. She just stared, her pupils dilated, breath shallow, body unmoving. Mariah noticed something strange. Whenever Clara entered the room, the angel stood. He didn't speak, didn't reach, but he stood, as if recognizing something in her that mirrored his own silence. On the 5th night, she said, "I want to be undone." Mariah leaned in. "What do you mean?" Clara's voice trembled like a psalm, slipping from the lips of a dying nun. "Not touched, not taken, just unraveled by what he carries." Episode 9, The Night the Mirrors Cried. It started with a crack, tiny, barely a whisper in glass. But by midnight, every mirror in the brothel had fractured, each in perfect silence. Not shattered, not broken, just cracked like something inside was trying to break out, or finally speak. Mariah noticed it first. Her mirror, the one above her vanity, had split down the center of her reflection, like a judgment only she could feel. She touched the glass. It was warm, and behind the surfaces something moved. Luca's room was worse. Her mirror didn't just crack, it wept. Thin trails of moisture streamed down the glass, but not from condensation, from inside, as if the mirror was bleeding tears. She screamed. Mariah ran in. The angel was already there, standing before the mirror, wings open, eyes dim, It's happening, Luca whispered, shaking. They're starting to remember. The mirrors began to reflect things that weren't real, or rather things that had been forgotten. Teresa looked into hers and saw her younger self at 13, clutching a stuffed bear and whispering, "I didn't say no, I frowned." Another girl, Yara, ran screaming when her mirror showed her mother weeping in a church, holding the rosary Yara had pawned to buy pills. Even Ivanka saw herself in her 20s, on her knees, but not for a client for communion. Mariah stood before hers, afraid. The crack across her reflection looked like a scar. Then it blinked. Not her, the reflection. It blinked, and then it spoke. "You still think you're made of dirt." But even dirt was kissed by God's breath before it turned to flesh. She collapsed, not in fear, but in recognition. All this time, she'd hidden pieces of herself inside silence. Now, the mirror was returning them, and the angel. He walked from room to room, laying one finger on each mirror, and every time he touched the glass, it changed. The reflections didn't disappear, they forgave. Teresa's mirror, episode 10, when the devil knocked and it didn't answer. It was the coldest night of the season. Even the air felt sharpened. No clients came, no laughter, no prayers, just the waiting silence of a place that had seen too much truth to pretend anymore. Then came the knock. 3 taps, slow, deliberate, wrong. Ivanka reached for the door, but her hand frowned an inch away. Not from fear, from instinct, the kind buried deep in the bonus, the kind that whispered, "Don't let it in. It doesn't need to enter to ruin you." Mariah stood at the top of the stairs, clutching the banister. She didn't know why, but she began to weep. Something in her remembered that sound. Not from earth, not even from hell, from the space in between, where promises rot and fallen things wait to be worshipped. The angel stood up. He had been still for hours, unmoving, like he'd been listening for something no one else could hear. He walked toward the door, not in fear. In recognition, Luca appeared beside Mariah, whispering without moving her lips, "He's come, but not to fight, to see if the wounds are still open." The knob twisted once, but the door never opened, because the angel spoke, not loud, not soft, just final. "You are late." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Candles died. The crucifix on the wall above Ivanka's desk turned upside down and then cracked in half. A voice answered, but not from behind the door, from everywhere. "And still, I was invited once." Before she began praying, before you began weeping, Mariah's knees buckled. The voice didn't sound like fire or rage. It sounded like longing, like something that had lost heaven long ago and still dreamed of revenge disguised as affection. Luca stepped forward, her eyes lit with something ancient. "You don't belong here anymore," she whispered, "not because we are pure, but because we are no longer ashamed." The silence after that was deeper than fear, and the known final tap, but this time, not on the door, on the mirror in the hallway. A single fingerprint appeared on the glass, but no one was touching it. Ivanka gasped. The print began to smoke, burning itself into the mirror, and as it did, the angel raised his hand and did not open the door. The walls moaned once, low, not. Episode 11. The touch that burned through a soul. Mariah had never touched him before, not once. She thought she didn't deserve to. She thought if she did, something holy would recoil or worse, reveal. But on the 11th night, as the candlelight swayed like whispered secrets, and the air smelled like unanswered prayers, she reached out, and the angel let her. Her fingers brushed his, and suddenly, she wasn't in the brothel anymore. She stood barefoot on cracked earth. All around her, children wept without mouths, and stars bled down from the sky like shattered halos. But the worst part, she saw herself, not once, but 12 times. 12 versions of her life, 12 moments she had bled, begged, laid, touched, lost, screamed, laughed, all staring back, and each one whispered the same thing. You think shame kept you alive, but it was grace, disguised as stubbornness. Her knees gave out. The angel caught her before she hit the ground. His hand on her chest wasn't heavy, but it burned, not her skin, her memory. She saw the first man who used her. She saw the night she stole. She saw the child she once dreamed of keeping but never got to hold. And in all of it, there was one thing she'd never noticed before. The angel had been there, in shadows, in light, in silence, always watching, not judging, just waiting for the moment she'd be brave enough to remember herself completely. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the room, but she was different. She looked at her hands like they were new, like they could create instead of just endure. Luca Saturday nearby, clutching a candle that hadn't melted at all. The flame was still, like it, too, was watching. Mariah turned to the angel. Her voice shook. Why did it hurt so much? He didn't speak right away. Then he leaned forward, wings barely rustling the air, because the soul must blister before it can breathe. That night, Mariah didn't pray with her mouth. She didn't need to. Episode 12. The girl who thought she was hell's favorite. Her name was Sarah. She wore black eyeliner like armor, heels like weapons, and a laugh that tasted like venom. She used to joke she was hell's favorite daughter. The devil tips better than God, she'd say, sipping gin, and at least he doesn't ask questions afterward. No one dared argue, not because they believed her, but because deep down, some of them feared it was true. But the night she met the angel, something cracked. Not her voice, not her pride, her certainty. It was past midnight when she stumbled into Luca's room, eyes bloodshot, perfume too sharp. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was daring the divine to look her in the face. And he did. The angel stood in the corner, quiet as usual, but when their eyes met, Sarah dropped her glass. I've seen your kind before, she hissed. In nightmares, in mirrors, a man who said they loved me before choking me with scripture. The angel didn't move, didn't blink, only whispered, you carry fire, but not all fire belongs to hell. Sarah laughed, bitter. I've sinned in every language. I've kissed death on the lips and dared it to stay. You think one feathered ghost is gonna shake me, but her hands trembled, because beneath the defiance was a child still waiting to be punished. Then Luca entered the room, holding the candle that never melted. Sarah rolled her eyes. Let me guess, no, we cry and burn incense. No, Luca said gently. Now you remember? The angel stepped forward, and for a moment, Sarah flinched, not from fear, from recognition. He reached toward her chest, stopping just before touching, and the room changed. Sarah found herself in a church she hadn't seen in years. She was 7 again, knees bruised from kneeling too long, a priest's voice behind her, words like penance, unclean, temptation. But in this memory, something shifted. The stained glass glowed brighter, the pews cracked open like ribs, and from within them, hands reached out. Women's hands, girls' hands, her hands, all whispering, you are not cursed, you are echo, and echoes are proof that someone screamed before you. Sarah collapsed to her knees. The angel caught her just as they had caught Mariah, but this time, his wings opened fully. Everyone in the brothel felt it. A wind that wasn't wind, a warmth that didn't come from flame, a sound like a hymn swallowed by a throat too ashamed to sing. When Sarah woke, she was silent. Luca brought her water. Mariah lit a candle. No one spoke, until Sarah whispered, I thought I was hell's favorite, but I was just the loudest girl trying to get heaven's attention. That night, she didn't work. She Saturday outside on the steps, barefoot, watching the stars like they owed her something, and in her hand, clenched tight, was a torn scrap of red bedsheet. She would later tell Mariah, I used to use this to tie up clients. Now I keep it as proof that even sins can become ribbons when you stop tying them to shame. Episode 13. The night he dared to pray back. They always prayed to him, whispered into candlelight, breathed trembling words into the space between their bodies and his silence. But no one had ever seen him pray. Until that night. It was just after 3 a.m. The hour of thin veils. Luca had fallen asleep mid-verse. Sarah Saturday curled in the corner, clutching her ribbon of sin-turned memory. Mariah was in the hallway, washing old sheets that now smelled more like smoke and myrrh than sweat. The angel was alone, or so they thought. He stepped into the center of the brothel's parlor, the room where clients used to drink, where shame used to lounge on couches like royalty, where sin was once a business. He knelt, not gracefully, desperately, and the girls who saw it never forgot. An angel on his knees, not before a throne, but before absence. His wings trembled, his hands curled knit in power, but in pleading, and though his mouth moved, no one heard his voice, because angels, when they truly pray, don't speak out loud. They pray in memory, and every feather in his wings begin to darken only by own. Not with soot, but with regret. Mariah dropped the bed sheets. She couldn't breathe. She stepped into the room, barefoot, her heart pounding like a hymn out of rhythm. She watched, and slowly, she heard it, not from his lips, but from the walls, from the floorboards, from the mirrors still bearing scars from the night they cried. A whisper, I did what you would not. I loved them, not as vessels, not as warnings, but as they are. And for that, you turned your face from me. The flame above the fireplace bent sideways. The crucifix that had broken the nights before mended itself. And from somewhere beyond language, a second whisper came. Not thunder, not light. A pause. Heaven did not speak, but heaven listened. The angel bowed his head lower. One tear fell. It struck the floor like a stone into still. Episode 14. The woman who gave birth without touch. Her name was Reina. She was the quiet one, too quiet, even for a brothel. She rarely spoke, never smiled. She served her clients like a ritual, disconnected, efficient, almost sacred in her stillness. No one knew her story. They only knew she refused to be touched yet never turned away a man. Then one morning, she woke up bleeding between the legs. But there was no pain, only heat, and a deep, slow pulsing in her belly like something had been planted and waited too long to bloom. Ivanka thought it was illness. Mariah thought it was trauma. Luca touched her wrist once and whispered, there's something inside you, but it's not sickness. It's been watching, growing, waiting to be named. Within a week, Reina began to swell, not just in the belly, but in spirit. She began humming, not lullabies, scripture, from a language no one remembered teaching her. The angel watched her from afar, but he never got close, not until the 8th night. That night, the walls dripped, not water, not blood, thick, fragrant, olive sweet and golden, running down from the cracks in the ceiling, as if heaven itself was trying to anoint something unclean for its own altar. Reina collapsed mid-step. She didn't scream. She laughed. La, Sandro, holy, wild echoed through the brothel like bells in a church that had forgotten how to ring. Luca ran to her side. Mariah followed. The angel came last. No one asked how it was possible. No one questioned. Because when Reina's body arched and her breath caught, there was no blood, only light. A faint glow radiated from her abdomen, as if her womb had become a lantern, burning. Episode 15, final. The brothel without sin. It happened on the 15th night. No screams, no sirens, no wind, just a single candle refusing to go out. And fire, not like flames clawing through wood, not rage, not punishment, but a fire that chose what it touched. It did not spread, it descended, a silent flame from the ceiling above room 1, Maria's room. It kissed the floor, and the floor instead of burning began to sing. Luca was the first to feel it. She dropped to her knees before the heat even reached her. Sarah tried to run and stopped, because her ribbon had turned to light in her hand. Ivanka screamed, not in fear, but in recognition. It's not here to destroy, she whispered. It's here to cleanse. The angel stood in the center of the hallway, wings folded, eyes closed. He didn't command the fire, he welcomed it, and the children as child lay in the crib with a smite still for a baby. He stared at the ceiling and whispered one word, Amen. And then the fire spread. But it wasn't fire anymore. It was memory unburned, sin unlaced, shame unwritten. Wherever it touched, the walls changed. They peeled back like old skin, revealing the truth beneath. Prayer woven into brothel floorboards, angels asleep in perfume bottles, faith blooming from lipstick stains. Mariah stood in the flames and didn't burn. Instead, the ash swirled around her like smoke rising in reverse, returning to her lungs. She breathed it in, and in that breath, she remembered every client who ever looked at her and called her less. She exhaled, and with it, released every version of herself she never chose but carried anyway. Luca knelt before the crib. The child reached out, touched her forehead, and for the first time since she was 16, Luca sang, not in English, not in Latin, but in the voice she thought had been stolen the night her innocence was. Sarah stood in front of her mirror. It cracked again, but this time, the shards fell upward. and her reflection smiled first. Ivanka lit a cigarette and put it out. She sat in her office, alone, hands trembling, whispering, if this is how judgment feels, then maybe hell was just an echo after all. And the angel, he turned to the door, the same door the devil had once knocked on. He opened it, and no one stood there, just the street, the night, the world. But this time, the road smelled like resin and rain. By morning, the fire was gone. The building still stood, but it wasn't a brothel anymore. The red lights had melted. The walls had no numbers. The mirrors no longer showed reflections in the light. People came, not to buy, not to sin, but to sit. Some knelt, some wept, some simply stared. No one asked who ran the place, because there were no rules, only silence and a presence. Raina and the child were gone. No footprints, only a white feather in the crib, curled like a comma at the end of a sentence Heaven had once been afraid to finish. The angel stayed for one more night. Then, as the final candle burned down to a whisper, he walked into Mariah's room. She didn't ask if he was leaving. She only said, "We were never a brothel. We were a prayer," pretending to be unworthy. He nodded, touched her cheek, and disappeared. Some say he returned to heaven. Others say he walks the alleys of other cities, listening for broken hallelujahs. But Mariah knows the truth. He didn't leave. He became the silence between the words, and the fire that doesn't burn, but remembers.